Hey everybody, happy Thursday. I hope you are doing well. For those of you that are new, my name is Susan. I am a freelance fiction editor specializing in science fiction, fantasy, and romance. Now, present tense versus past tense is always an interesting conversation to have because there is no right answer. Any book can be either tense. And it's always fascinating to have this conversation with readers and authors alike because sometimes, even unknowingly, most everybody has a preference. So before I dive into what you should think about when deciding between the two, I challenge you to go back to the last 5 books that you absolutely loved and see what tense they were in. I'll bet the majority are in one camp or the other, and I'll bet it's for a reason that I'll get to in just a few minutes, but I'm super curious to see what you end up with. Drop me a comment below. Let me know if you are just different with every book, if you lean present tense, if you lean past tense, or whatever you end up with. I'm super curious. Either way, there are generally 4 factors you want to consider when deciding between present tense and past tense in your writing. The first and the biggest is preference. Past tense versus present tense might not even be something you've even considered deciding or making a decision on when you're writing. You just write and that's how you write. And if that's the case, great. No need to change. Unless you're trying to grow, to change your writing for some reason, you should almost always default to what feels most natural to you, because then you're going to be able to focus on the characters and the plot of your story and figuring all that out, because it is a complicated thing to do outside of just the tense versus focusing on whether or not you wrote he said versus he says. But if you are looking to push past that for some reason, the second thing you want to consider is genre expectations. Unless you read really eclectically across the board, the thing I had you do earlier where you look at the last 5 books you really loved to see what tense they're in, I'll bet you the majority of those books probably fall into one genre, maybe even one subgenre. And that could be why they have a common tense, why they're all in past tense or present tense. Not always. Unlike point of view, first person versus third person, tense tends to vary more within genre. Again, there is no right answer to this. But that being said, there are always trends, so it is something to consider if you look at all of the current comps that you have and there is a trend. Is that something that you want to go with, sort of with reader expectations? If you want to buck that, go in a different direction for a certain reason, anything like that, it could be a part of your consideration. Number 3 is point of view. As with your story being able to be in present tense or past tense, your story can be any POV, first, third, second, and it can be any combination therein. You can really make it whatever you want, whatever works best for you. And if you have questions on first person versus third person, I have done a video on that. I will link it up above and check it out. But it is interesting to note, like with genre expectations, there are trends. Many times, if a book is in first person, it will be in present tense because that gives really a deeper connection to the reader. Not only are you saying I, me, my, but they're doing it presently. They're doing it right now. So I walk, I run, I fight. They're experiencing the action and the plot as the character, and there's that immediate feel to it that is very powerful. Versus many times, third person tends to be past tense. So even if you've written a book in third person limited with deep POV, and by that I mean you're not having a narration, you're still seeing the immediate character's thoughts and feelings, you're still seeing it just from their limited point of view, there's still that distance with the past tense. He fought, she kicked, they whatever. And having that bit of distance with that past tense is sometimes necessary, especially if you are writing a bigger world, if you're writing like an epic fantasy or an adventure fantasy or anything like that, where you need to sort of feel the wider scope. You need to be able to have the reader see the world, not just be within that one character's shoes presently. So that's something to consider as well. And as I mentioned, keep an eye on your current comparable titles, comps, as well as the top books in the genre to see what they're doing, and again, make your decision from there. Number 4 is story considerations. So consider if there's anything in your story that should sway your your decision on tenses one way or the other. For example, if you are writing in past tense, but the story you're telling has frequent references to the further past, and by that I mean your main character did something. So she fought, he hid, they did whatever. And then you have to then describe something that happened further in the past. They had done that. She had done that. What have you. You're going to be flipping back and forth a lot between past and past perfect, which a lot of people find confusing and hard to do. Versus if you wrote it in present tense, then you're saying she does this, she walks, but she walked previously. Flipping between present tense and past tense many times people find a lot more natural and a lot less confusing. So then you're making sure it's in the far past and not the current past. It can get very confusing. It can be done, but it can be very confusing. Or if you're writing your story in present tense, but you wanted to write your story as like a book-ended story, so where you're opening it as somebody is telling the story to you, or for example, once upon a time type of a introduction, anything like that, but then you want the middle arc, the main arc of the story to be in present tense, you should ask yourself if that makes sense. If you are setting your story up to be told that it has already happened, and then you're telling it in present tense, while you can have that immediate connection still, it might be confusing because the reader is already aware that this has happened. They're aware that this is in the past, that they're seeing something in the past. So would past tense be more natural for that story setup? Probably. But again, it's up to you. There are a lot of considerations in deciding past tense versus present tense depending on the story that you're trying to tell, how you're trying to tell it, and what's going to make it easiest to write. Again, the most important of all of these is your preference. As I mentioned, making sure your story is flowing naturally so that you and the readers can focus more on what's going on in the story versus how the story is being told. But if for some reason you are wondering if you should change how you're writing, or you want to push your writing to a different level, stretch your writing skills and try something new, these are the considerations that I would recommend as you make that decision. Hopefully this has been helpful. Don't forget to let me know below what you prefer as far as tense, or what you found in the books that you have either read recently or most loved, and what those were, present tense versus past tense, first person versus third person. I'm very curious because I have theories. I'll bet you after talking about this, you probably have theories on these different trends, how they work and why. Anyway, don't forget to leave me a comment. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next week, keep writing.